Welcome to Module 3 of CM 481. By now you should have finished with Module 1 and Module 2 and all of the quizzes and the assignments that have gone along with those modules. And we're going to jump into Module 3. There is also going to be a quiz that goes along with Module number 3. So make sure you open that up while you're watching this so that you can answer those quiz questions while you watch this. But today in Module 3 we're going to be talking about documentation and record keeping on the job site. Documentation and record keeping is such an incredibly important thing for superintendents on the job site. And so we're going to go through some of the basics of it today, and we're also going to look into some of the new technologies that are coming out. And you should leave this class today having a good understanding of what documentation and record keeping on the job site looks like. And we're also going to have an assignment towards the end of this that I'll explain to you that has to do with documentation. And it's going to give you some practice in documentation. And so the first thing I want to do is talk to you about effective documentation. Effective, okay? Now that means that it actually has an effect, okay? You can actually use it. Now, so many times there's documentation out there on the job site that is worthless. Somebody did it because they had to do it and they were told to do it, but the documentation was actually not good for anything. And so I want to talk to you about some things that you can do to make your documentation effective. The first thing that can make your documentation effective is being objective and truthful. Okay, and what we mean by objective is honest. Having an honest and truthful opinion of what is actually happening on the job site and documenting it not from your own bias but from an objective point of view. Actually just looking at it and documenting it the way it is, not the way you want it to be, because so many times we want things to be different than they actually are. One of the biggest things that a superintendent can build in a team is trust. The only way to do that is to maintain dignity and truthfulness. And so as we talk about your documentation, this is just one more way that you can maintain your team and keeping your team together. I have seen some teams absolutely torn apart by a superintendent's untruthfulness. Them actually lying about situations that they had with subcontractors. It absolutely tore teams apart, and subcontractors stopped listening to that superintendent. They didn't trust him anymore. And this is one of the things that you can do as a superintendent, as a job site manager, to make sure that your team stays together. Be objective. Be truthful in all of your documentation, no matter what type of documentation that is. And we're going to talk about the different types. The next thing is timeliness. Now, this is a huge mistake of younger folks, okay? And by younger folks, I mean you guys, all right, and me. And hey, I'm not that old. I'm fairly young, okay, relatively, okay. So even young people sometimes have a hard time remembering things. We don't have to be 75 years old to forget things. The best time to write something down is right when it happens. It's fresh in your mind and you remember the details and your memory won't fade by the end of the day. Do it now. Write it down. And you've heard me say this before, but a short pencil is better than a long memory. A short pencil is better than a long memory. I know you want to write that down right now, but you may not have a pencil with you. So get a pencil. Write it down. Because one day you're going to be out there and then you're going to be like, oh, that Bruner, he told me something about a pencil, but I didn't write it down, so I don't remember what it is. Okay? Short pencil is better than a long memory. You really need to write things down. This was a mistake that I made quite often when I was first in the industry. I just didn't write things down. I thought I would remember them. And so eventually I started carrying around my books and actually writing things down in them. Retrievability. A document is only as good as being able to find it. Okay, if you can't find a document, then the document might as well not exist. So you need to be able to retrieve it. And I'm not talking like a day from now. I'm talking like a year from now or 2 years from now, long past the project being done. We need to retrieve something. We should be able to go in and find it. We need to have some type of organizational system. Even on your emails. I know some of you are guilty, maybe a lot of you are guilty, of having thousands of items in your inbox. Well, maybe once you get out into industry, we should start sorting those and actually put them where they go. So maybe you have a folder for each job, and in that folder you have owner communication, subcontractor communication. Maybe you even have that broken down into each subcontractor. Because you might think, well, I can just do like a main word search and find that email to that subcontractor, or search his name or something like that. But that doesn't always work. As a matter of fact, a lot of times it doesn't work because you don't know what's in that email. It may not be from a certain person. You may just be looking for a topic, and it might be from somebody within that company, and it may not even have the company name on it, and you can't find it. And it's there, but you can't find it. And so you need to have those things organized. Retrievability, being able to find it, having an organizational system is going to make for effective job site documentation. And then we've got appropriate distribution. Now, this is one of those things, if you, let's say you had a safety incident on your job site and you had to do some documentation on it. Okay, that's a good thing. But do you really want to send that to everybody in the company and maybe the owner of the project? Do you really want to send that to everybody? No, of course not. You're going to want to keep that internal to your company so that you guys can use that report to make things better, but maybe you don't want to send it to the president of your company. I was on a project one time, and it had fallen behind, like a lot of projects do, and one of the interns was putting together an email about schedule to go out to the subcontractors to get everybody back on track. So it was, we're behind, here's how we're going to get back on track. This person, this intern, sent that email not just to the subcontractors, but I worked for a national company, and so I worked in Phoenix, and the headquarters were way across the country. The owners of the company were way across the country. This person, for some reason, decided to copy the owners of our construction company. So the president and CEO of the company across the country. And you better believe that when they got an email that a project was behind schedule, there was some answering that had to happen. And so there were some meetings with the owners of the company, because the distribution for that email about the schedule was not appropriate. And make sure that you don't hit reply all the time. Okay? Make sure you don't. Have you ever gotten one of those emails that somebody replied all and they shouldn't have? Sometimes they're kind of hilarious. At NAU, I've had some of those where somebody hit reply all and they replied to everybody at NAU, everybody on that list, which is like all across the campus, with some really weird question, and you just laugh and you're like, I'm glad I'm not that person. So make sure you have appropriate distribution. And then you want your documentation to be complete and comprehensive. Complete and comprehensive. You may think that as you're writing something out, that maybe you don't need to put in that level of detail because everybody will know that, or you'll remember that. But when you are complete and comprehensive, the level that I'm talking about is 5 years down the road when nobody remembers this project and they need to go back because there's some kind of lawsuit. They should be able to read this documentation and know exactly what's going on, where it's going on, who's involved, the color of the tile, and when the submittal got submitted on that tile. That level of detail should be in that report, complete and comprehensive for people that are not on the project. Not complete and comprehensive for somebody that's going to look at it tomorrow or the next day, or the other person that's on the job site, or even the subcontractors on the job site. Complete and comprehensive for way down the road. That's complete and comprehensive. Make sure it is, and that's going to make the documentation effective. And I've had these instances where we've had to go back and look at daily reports from a couple years ago because we had a failure in a parking lot and we were trying to find out why it failed, and couldn't find anything in the documentation. And come to find out that let me give you an example. It was a trench failure that sunk down and the whole parking lot went like this, and we're trying to find out, well, what happened there? And it ends up that there was a bunch of rains during that time, and they put mud basically back as backfill to that trench, which was not good, and eventually that failed over time. But there was no documentation of this other than the superintendent's memory. There's nothing in the daily reports about it, even about the storm that came through. So we've got a problem there. We need more detail. It needs to be complete and comprehensive so we can go back to it. And there's different types of things that we need to document on a job site. And so let me ask you this question. Do you think this photo right here, do you think this incident needs to be documented? I would say you're probably looking at this photo and saying, yeah, it probably does. This happened to be a loader that was on a job site of mine. You might know the High Country Conference Center. And it backed into an excavation that was dug out for a stairwell. And it went over. The guy was fine. This is our fine superintendent standing there smoking a cigarette. And that was a rental loader from Sun State Equipment. And so Sun State Equipment was not too happy that that was on its side. But they rolled it back over, and it was fine. It started right back up. So luckily nobody got hurt in this particular accident. But this is an incident that needs to be documented on a job site. I think you would all agree with me. Well, how about this? We've got two folks standing on a job site, figuring out something on a set of plans, having a conversation. Do you think that needs to be documented on a job site? Yes, conversations need to be documented on a job site? How about this? Oops, we got a little problem here, not lining up. Do we have a problem here? Does this need to be documented on a job site? Do you think? We're going to have a change. We're going to have a change order. This is probably going to cost some money. Probably needs to be documented. All right, we've got some emailing going on here. Do you think that emails, while they are a form of documentation, they're only good if you can retrieve them, if you just remember what I just told you? And so, do you think this should be something that should be organized as documentation for the job site? Yes, of course it should be. All right, we got this situation. We're having a meeting on the job site. We've got the architects and the owners and the project engineers and the superintendents. We got them all here in this meeting. Do you think meetings need to be documented? Absolutely, meetings need to be documented. And that's why we have meeting minutes. How about this? Got a little problem here. Nobody noticed that that toilet was not on the other side where we can mount the toilet paper holder. Okay, so we've got a punch list item here. We're going to have to change this around. We're going to have to fix this. And do we have a reason for documentation? Yes, it's a punch list. Okay, so there are lots of different reasons for documentation on a job site, but I've broken it down into this list for you of events on the job site, conversations, costs, correspondences, meetings, and punch lists. And so what type of events do you think need to be documented on a job site? And so I'll ask you that right now. We've got accidents, we've got changes in the schedule, we've got employees on the job site, number of employees. We might have a catastrophic event that happens on the job site, a weather event. How about a structural failure? Anything that relates to work on the job site could be considered an event. And these events need to be documented. Okay, I'll talk to you about how we do that documentation here in a minute. What type of conversations need to be documented? You head out to the job site to have a conversation, or maybe not to have a conversation, but that conversation ends up happening because a subcontractor comes up to you and says, hey, I was wondering about this wall over here and where we were supposed to put it. The plans are kind of off. And you have this conversation with them, and you decide to put the wall in this particular location. Should that be documented? Yes. Should these conversations that just happen on, let's say, the phone. Somebody calls up on the phone, and you're a superintendent, you have this conversation with them, and they're talking about that same wall, and you make a decision on it. Should that be documented? Definitely. Definitely. So even phone conversations. And then costs. Are we going to have cost issues on a job? Yeah, because I don't know that I've ever been on a job that didn't have a cost issue that came up, that didn't have a change order on it. I would love to have a job with no cost issues, that had no change orders, but that's part of construction. So we are going to have these. We are going to run into issues, and we are going to have to document those things. And then correspondence. That was those emails I was talking to you about. Should we organize and keep emails so that they're ready to go for the job when we need that documentation? Yeah. And there's going to be other types of correspondence that goes on. You're going to have letters, and you're going to have some contracts and some back and forth with subcontractors in other ways that are not just emails. So that all needs to be documented. Meetings. Meetings are important. And why would we document meetings? Because sometimes in meetings we make decisions that affect the final product of the building. And so we need to document those so that when something is changed on a job, it's in writing that that was the decision by the architect or by the owner to make it look like that, or to approve that color or that material. We need something in writing, and the meeting minutes become that thing. And then we've got our punch list. So our punch list at the end of the project, this is an organized way of putting into writing what needs to be done on the job so that we can get substantial completion on the job, so that we can complete that punch list, check those items off, and say, here, owner, you have a complete building. So on our events and conversations documentation, there's lots of different ways we can do this. Daily reports are one of them. Daily reports are a documentation every day, thus the daily thing, of what goes on the job, the date, the project name and number, the individual making the report, weather information, the description of activities, things that have happened on the job. How about the contractors that are on the job, or the amount of labor that's on the job, the subcontractors that are on the job that day and how many people they have, the equipment that's on the job that day. Are we running cranes? Did we bring in loaders? Just the equipment that's running on the job. Materials, so any material deliveries that come in, any visitors that come to the job. In this daily report, we can have documentation on our conversations that we had with people. We can have documentation on the decisions that were made with subcontractors about certain things, can go into this report. This is a really important report. A lot of times this is done through electronic means these days, but it can also be done on paper still. But programs like Procore and other ProLions and Viewpoint and all these different programs that are out there, there's lots of them, and you've probably worked with some in your internships, but all of these have a way to do daily reports in the program. And so I've got a short video for you about daily reports in Procore, because we do work pretty closely with Procore in this program. So take a look at the daily reports in Procore.
In this video, we'll be going over Procore's Daily Log tool, which is designed to help you track all of your construction site's daily job-related activities. First, let's click on the Project's Daily Log tab. At the top, you can specify whether you want to view the daily log for a specific day or a particular date range. You can also search your daily log, create a PDF for printing or archiving purposes, and sort by individual reports. By default, the weather log will be listed first, which shows the current weather report based upon the job site's mailing address or GPS coordinates. All weather information is gathered from Weather Underground, or from a custom weather station that's been set up on site. You can also add any observed weather conditions to supplement or correct the stated weather conditions. Now let's minimize the weather log. Notice that you can also drag and drop a log to a different location if desired. The most popular daily log is the manpower log, which gives you the ability to create user-specific or vendor-specific logs. For example, you could select a vendor, specify how many workers were on site, the hours that were worked, the appropriate cost code and location, as well as any related comments. Click the plus button to create a new entry. Similarly, you can also create an entry that's specific to a single person. Although you can create logs from your computer, many users prefer the convenience of creating all of their logs directly from their smartphone or tablet using Procore's iOS and Android mobile applications. One particularly useful feature that will save you time and streamline your workflow is the ability to create a new log entry by copying one from a previous day. Simply click the Copy Daily Log button, select the date in logs, and click Copy. Once a new entry has been created, you can still make minor changes to the entry as needed. You can also click the email button to distribute the daily logs to other team members. Admin users can access the tool's advanced configuration settings to set tool preferences. For example, if more than one person is going to add log entries, you might want to mark the Show Created by on Log Entries checkbox for a more detailed log record. Thanks for watching.
Okay, weekly and monthly reports. These are probably items that project engineers will be taking care of. This is stuff that you're going to take care of as soon as you are out of college. And they're usually to inform upper management and owners about the project. Like what's going on the project. Are you, finished with the project? Are you, finished with certain items on the project? Where are you at in the schedule? All these different things. Get people excited about the project and let them know where things are at. Diaries. So diaries are something that's kind of like a daily report, where you can record conversations and anything that happens throughout the day, and it must be a bound book. So to be admissible in the court, usually it has to be a bound diary that you can't remove pages or insert pages into it without it being known. Okay, so usually when you buy a diary, it has like pages on it. But more important than this, because I don't use a bound one that actually has the days of the week and dates on it for the year. I don't do that. What I use is just a simple notebook. So these are the notebooks I've been using for years, and they've got all of my notes in them from conversations that I've had. They've got my to-dos and the different check mark boxes. And so this is the way I organize things. And I have a whole shelf full of these things from all the way back 15 years ago. And so I can go back, and each of them has a date, and I can say, well, on that date I had this conversation because I wrote it down. And so I encourage you to start a habit like that. Now you might say, well, I take notes in my iPad, or I take notes on my phone. It's not the same. It never will be the same. You can still lose those things. It's still really, really hard to organize those things. I would encourage you to have a notebook that you carry around with you along with your iPad or along with your computer. And you take notes in those. Use your hand. Use the writing that they taught you in first and second and third grade. Just write it all down. Okay? Put little boxes next to your to-dos and then go back and check them off. It feels really good when you check things off. And you just check off your to-dos. So use those things. Diaries. Now, logs are going to be usually, they can be written, but they could be, electronic too. But these could be call logs. This could be logs of your subcontractors and arriving on site. This could be delivery logs, material logs, all kinds of logs, just so that you can go back and you can say, okay, all of the material deliveries on the site are on this log, and I can go back and find out when it was delivered and how much of it was delivered, etc. Video recordings. So sometimes video is a lot more powerful than pictures. So for example, one time we were getting ready to allow the owner to start moving furniture into a building. Well, we were still working on punch list, and the owner wanted to move in early. So we allowed him to do that, but we knew that usually when you move things into a building, it creates more punch list items. And so we wanted to make sure that if anything big came up, we weren't being charged for those items that his furniture, fixtures, and equipment people were doing on the job. So I went through and I did a video of the whole building, slowly, of all the walls. Okay, we're walking through the hallway, in the corridor, room 405, etc. So that was video documentation. We also take video documentation towards the end when they start doing training on equipment. So equipment manufacturers will come in and do a training for the building owners or the people that are running the building, the facilities folks, and they'll do a training like, this is how you use this. We'll videotape that for them and give it to them later in their closeout materials. That's another opportunity for video on a job. All really important and good uses of video. There's also drone footage these days. Lots of drone footage on jobs, and that's important for knowing where the project is at. We can also do surveys and laser scans with drones, and really awesome stuff going on right now with all of that. Time-lapse photography. So I'm going to show you a time-lapse of the College of Business project. So take a look at this real quick. In this, you'll see that there's multiple times that it snowed on the project, and that it snowed and it melted, and we continued construction through that time. So this time-lapse video that we put together for that job helped us get a future job, because we were able to explain how we continued with the precast concrete because of the type of building it was, because of our expertise in that type of building construction. We were able to get a future project using this time-lapse photography of the College of Business. So time-lapse photography can be valuable. Schedules. Schedules are a valuable tool. You should know this because you've probably taken scheduling class at this point. But schedules can be a valuable tool for documentation in that you can add things to them. So for example, you're getting ready to paint a wall, and the architect has not approved this paint submittal because they're deciding if they want a blue or a grayish, you know, whatever. And so you put submittal approval by architect as another task in there, and it pushes out the end date of the project because this submittal approval. And so now you have documentation of why the project is ending later than planned. Hopefully paint doesn't actually make your project end later than planned, but progress schedules are a big way to record and document events on the job. And then we've got our cost documentation. Now, there's so much cost documentation stuff. You guys have gone through estimating class. I don't need to talk to you about costs a lot in this one, but what I do want to talk to you about is what's specific to superintendent work, which is extra work authorizations. They might be called something else at your company, but I'm going to use that term for this class. Extra work authorizations and time and material verification tickets. So for an example, and let me show you some pictures here. This is a picture of a footing that's being dug for a parking garage up on North Campus for the High Country Conference Center. Now, we were digging this footing along, and all of a sudden we ran into what the arrow is pointing at, which is a duct bank. Okay, so there's this big electrical duct bank right where our footing is supposed to be. We've got an issue, okay, but we want to continue working on that, on our footings. We don't want it to just stop. So we continued working on that footing, and we continued with the changes to that footing and the concrete changes to that footing based on time and materials verification. Now, what that means is we got a revised design from the structural engineer, but instead of getting a cost for that footing from the subcontractor and moving forward with a change order and the change order process that takes time, and then it has to get approved by the owner, etc. Like it takes a long time. We just moved forward with it, and we said, okay, I will verify all the extra time that you have in this and all the extra materials that you have into this, and we'll move forward. So we ended up putting in a footing, and you'll see the rebar that's sticking out of that kind of runs at a weird angle. That's because that big block on top is spanning over the top of that duct bank. And we did all of this on time and materials verification. It might be something like you run into rock on your job site, but you need to keep going with excavation. So you have the time and materials verification for the extra equipment hours and the extra man hours on the job that they'll write down every day for you, the subcontractor will, and they'll bring it into you as a superintendent, and you'll sign off on it. Now, you're not signing off on costs. That's the big thing. Superintendents shouldn't be signing off on costs. They should be signing off just on time and materials verification. So even if there's cost on there, you could write on there for time and materials verification only and sign it. Now that should go back to the project manager, so the project manager knows that there is this extra work that's happening. There was an extra work authorization that was signed and said, okay, you can proceed with this extra work based on time and materials verification. And that goes back to the project manager, so the project manager knows those costs are coming. So that is really what I want to hit on with superintendents and the cost side today, and cost documentation. But all of that has to be logged. All of it has to be documented, and the extra work authorization has to be documented. So we've got EWA number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the job, and then we've got time and materials verification that goes along with each one of those. Okay, now a couple of these meeting minutes, you've studied this in other classes, and I don't want to go into it in real depth, but I did want to show you this quick video about meeting minutes from Procore and how they do this electronically now. And this will give you a good idea of what goes on with meeting minutes in really any type of project management software. This is Procore. Like I said, we work closely with Procore, and so this is an example of what they do.
All right, now let's talk about how you can create your own meetings in Procore. When you create a new meeting, you're essentially creating a new umbrella meeting. This is a type of recurring meeting where the regularly scheduled meetings fall under it on a daily, weekly, or bi-monthly basis. Let's take a look at the last weekly OAC meeting. You'll notice that it's in minutes mode. This means the meeting is currently taking place or has recently finished, in which case you and your team members are adding your notes and creating follow-up items to discuss at the next meeting. Since the meeting is in minutes mode, we can create a follow-up meeting that includes items that weren't marked as closed in the last meeting. When we create a follow-up meeting, we'll put the meeting into agenda mode, which means that it's on the agenda for a future meeting. On the view page, you'll see information that's been added about the meeting, as well as a list of users who were invited to the meeting and were able to attend. Next, you'll see all of the items on the meeting's agenda. Items are grouped by categories that the meeting's organizer previously defined. Each item should be assigned to a specific user along with a due date. Once an item has been resolved, it can be closed. So in this case, notice that one of the items was recently closed. Let's go ahead and create a follow-up meeting. As you can see, when you create a follow-up meeting, some business items have carried forward. Open or on hold items will persist to a follow-up meeting. This might mean that they are recurring items to be addressed, or that they've been put on hold until further information is found on the subject. Okay, now let's make some adjustments to the meeting before we distribute it to all of the invited users. You can edit the meeting date, start and end times, meeting location, and update the overview of the meeting, as well as include any relevant attachments. Now you might be wondering what happens if you click the draft meeting or private meeting options. When you save a meeting with the draft meeting option checked, you will not be able to distribute the meeting to anyone until this option is unchecked. For this reason, many project managers like to use this option when they need to create a placeholder meeting, because they still need to finalize the details of the agenda. It's important to remember that no fields are required to be filled out for a meeting if it's in draft mode. As far as the private meeting option, we're inheriting our current privacy settings for this meeting. You can override this default setting if you so choose on a meeting-by-meeting basis. The details of your meeting will only be viewable to admin-level users on the Meetings tool and the people on the attendee list, which you can reference here. I don't recommend changing this setting unless you want your meeting agenda and minutes exposed to everyone who has access to the Meetings tool. The scheduled attendees from the last meeting will automatically carry over, but you can still add others. Let's say you need the superintendent to attend the next meeting. When you're satisfied with the meeting, save the information. Now let's update our agenda items. First, we'll give it a descriptive title, assign it to the appropriate person, give it a due date and priority, and then leave a brief description with the details. And if you want to change the sorting order of the categories list, simply click here and drag a category and all of its items to its location. You can always edit the title of the category or any field if it has the blue caret in the right corner by simply double-clicking into the field you wish to edit. All right, our meeting agenda is now set. Now we're ready to distribute the agenda to the scheduled attendees. We do this by clicking the Distribute button, which sends each person on the attendee list an email with all of the meeting's information so that everyone will know what items will be discussed at the next meeting. Later, when the meeting starts, the meeting will need to be converted to minutes so that you and your team can start taking notes. Thanks for watching.
Okay, so now we have our punch list. The punch list is a big deal for a superintendent because you have to get the punch list written to be able to get the punch list completed so that you can get the project completed. Okay, and all of those are integrally tied to substantial completion and final completion, which are big deals in the construction industry because your liquidated damages are tied to those things. So this is important. So punch list is done a lot these days electronically. So we walk around the building with the architect or the owner and we look at something and the owner says, well, I see a paint chip right there, so we need to get that fixed. Okay. We write it down, we send it to the painter, and the painter comes back and he fixes that and we're done. Okay, it's that simple. But there could be thousands and thousands and thousands of punch list items from 20 or 30 different subcontractors on 5 different floors of a building, maybe 20 different floors of a building. So how do we keep this all straight? This is hard to keep straight. So we're using a lot of electronic means these days where we can actually walk around with our iPad, take a picture of something, post it on a plan, which immediately sends it to the right subcontractor so that they can come back in and fix that. So I've got a short video here from Procore on that too for you to watch.
You're in the home stretch. Let's talk punch lists. Many of you watching this video may use some sort of spreadsheet tool like Excel for tracking punch list items at the end of a project. This is oftentimes very inefficient because you need to walk the site with a pen and paper and a camera to take notes and pictures of deficient items. Then you return to your computer, upload the photos, enter in each field, and distribute the punch list around the site and hope that you didn't miss anything. With Procore, you can cut this process to 2 steps in one device. Step 1, create the punch list item. Step 2, mark the item as closed when the work is completed. Let's take this step by step. When it comes time to walk the site for punch list items, all you need is your tablet or smartphone and the Procore app. As you're walking the site, it's important for you to be as meticulous as possible, not only in recognizing punch list items, but also giving your subcontractors the most specific information you can in a manner that is time and cost effective to all parties. This is why you're going to start the punch list process from the Drawings tool. Doing this streamlines several processes. It places the punch list item right on its location to prevent confusion for the subcontractor. It saves you time when creating it by eliminating clicks as you switch between the Drawings and punch list tools. Finally, it saves you time down the road as you'll be able to use these markups to create your as-built right on your drawing. With this drawing-centric project management in mind, let's open up our floor plan. All right, pretend you're at Shoreline Park right now doing final walkthroughs and you come across a white paint spot on the green door frame to the 4th District Super's office, which you can see here. To drop a punch list item, you'll choose the punch pin tool from our markup tools on the right. Remember that if you need a refresher on each of these tools, you're always welcome to watch the drawings training video again. Now, when we first select the location of our punch pin, we'll be able to create our punch list item right away. First, we're going to add a title. Let's call it Fix Paint. We're going to leave the item open because it hasn't been resolved yet, and add a location. We can call out the specified location where the punch list item is by choosing from a list of locations, or we can add a new location to associate with this item. The due date is going to be a week from now since this is an easy fix, but it's not urgent. If the punch list tools administrator set up punch list types associated with the project, we can add a punch list item type. We're going to assign the punch list item to Patricia, the paint subcontractor from our directory, by searching for her name in contacts and clicking Done. Add a detailed description so Patricia doesn't have to come to us for more information once she begins working. Finally, we're going to take and attach a picture in one step right from the mobile device. We can either choose from pictures we've already taken from our device, or we can take one right now. Let's take one right now since I'm standing in front of the paint spot as we speak. We can mark up the picture to pinpoint the exact place of the deficiency using these familiar markup tools. And when we're done, click Save. We can add as many pictures as we like. When we're done, click Save again. And that's it. In just a few minutes, you've created a punch list item with a picture that was distributed to the assignee's email inbox when you click Save. And it's already been linked to an exact location on the drawing. If your subcontractors have gone through the subcontractor certification, they should know how to respond to this punch list item and mark it as resolved. When they do so, you'll receive an email immediately notifying you that the punch list item requires your attention. Subcontractors can even attach a photo so that you'll know right away from your email if the subcontractor did the work when he or she resolved the item. Once you're ready to confirm the work, go to the location with your tablet or smartphone and close the item out while you're looking at it. We can go to our drawing, click Edit, and mark the item as closed. Or we can go into the punch list tool and click on the item we want to close. You will be presented with all open items or items that haven't been resolved and closed and that are assigned to you. You can always click All and Closed in any combination and even search by keyword to filter the punch list items to what you want to see. As you can see, all of the information you added is readily available, including the picture you took. The only difference is that Patricia has now uploaded a picture and marked the item as resolved. It looks good from where I'm standing too, so I'm going to mark it as closed. There's two ways to do this. You can click Edit, Closed, and then Save, or the easiest way to do this is by drawing a check mark over the punch list item with your finger on the screen of the mobile device. Once I do this, it notifies Patricia that she has completed the item and lets the PM and anyone who can see the item in Procore's punch list tool know that the item is closed. There are a few other punch list items that need to be reviewed, so let's take a look at those as well. We can click into another item, and if it looks good on our end, which it does to me, we'll mark it as closed and Procore will send a notification to the subcontractor once it's done. Let's click into another item. Even though Max did add the custom trash cabinet, it conflicts with the existing kitchen drawers when you try to open it. So we're going to mark this unresolved again. We can click Edit and add a note that the cabinet conflicts. We'll now click Update. Just like when we close an item, when we mark an item unresolved, Procore will send the subcontractor a notification email that the item needs attention again, all in one simple step. Once he resolves the item to your satisfaction, you can mark it as closed. If you follow this process, it'll save you tons of time between creation, communication, and closure of punch list items.
Now we got some other stuff that's really cool on job sites that is being done these days, and it's all for job site documentation, but you guys are getting more familiar with drones and how drones are being used on job sites to fly around, take laser scans, take pictures of things that are going on. But it's not as easy as you think it is. There actually is licenses that are needed to be able to fly drones, and there's flight paths and different things that you need to have before you take that drone into the air. You'll find a lot of people that are using them illegally, but the FAA or whatever it is, has rules and laws about that. But those are being used on job sites quite a bit right now. Now, some other things that I found that were really cool: the laser scanning that's going on in jobs just for documentation purposes is really cool. We've got laser scanners that we set up in rooms to document what the room looks like at certain times. How about this one? Spot the robot dog walking around your job and just taking laser scans of everything. Oh, hey, Spot the dog, or Fluffy, or whatever you want to call it. Taking laser scans of the room so that there's documentation of what it was like exactly at that moment in time.
And I'd like to introduce Fluffy, our quadruped robotic dog. So this is a Boston Dynamics Spot. We've nicknamed him Fluffy, and we're utilizing it to actually do laser scans of our facility. That image is then utilized by our engineers to develop new vehicle programs, and it allows them to develop more accurate layout of our facilities. These cutting-edge technologies allow Ford Motor Company engineers to save money, retool facilities faster, and bring new vehicles to market sooner.
There's also handheld laser scanners these days, and so this is a big technology, that you can have a laser scanner built into a iPad, and you can actually be scanning things just as you're standing there working on stuff. That's big technology. There's a lot of different ways that people are documenting job sites. Something you might be required to do when you go out to work as a field engineer or project engineer is documenting the job site. They may say, go into all these rooms and take a 360 view picture of the room every other day and post it and organize it and all these different things. That might be part of your job, okay? And it's important, because then we have that documentation that we can go back to and say, all right, well, was this subcontractor in there on time doing what they were supposed to be doing? Were they actually done like they said they were, or were they still working on it, or was it not even in there? Well, we've got this picture from this day that says you guys weren't in there, and you weren't done, and you hadn't even started. So that story you're telling us doesn't make sense, and you are liable for some of these liquidated damages or whatever the situation may be. Okay, so there's so much going on in job site documentation, new technologies that are coming out all the time that are being used in job site documentation, but the basics still remain the same. Be objective and truthful. Be complete and comprehensive no matter what it is that you're doing. Make sure that your job site documentation is the best possible job site documentation that you can give, so that 5 years down the road people can look at that documentation and say, okay, I know exactly what was going on that job on that day. That's the level that you need to be putting together. Okay? So hopefully you enjoyed this. You guys are going to go out and do some documentation, and I'll explain that a little bit further now. But what I'm going to have you do is, for the next 4 days, you're going to be putting together daily reports for your day. Yes, for your day. Now, your day may vary quite a bit between the day, but I'm going to have you put together these daily reports. You're going to explain to me what you did throughout your day, conversations that you had during your day, important conversations, maybe not important conversations that you had during your day. I'm going to need you to take a picture of something that happened in your day that correlates to something that's in your daily report, and you're going to need to refer to that in your daily report. And it needs to be complete and comprehensive, so that 5 years from now, you could look back at that and say, okay, well, that's what I did on that day. It's pretty clear. I talked to John Smith, and I had a phone conversation with him at 12:10, and we talked about that assignment that was due the next day. Whatever it is. So be complete, be comprehensive in these, and be timely. Remember that whole timeliness thing? This is one assignment that there will be no late assignments accepted. You have to turn in this daily report by midnight that day. And the assignment only opens up that day. So you have 24-hour period to get the assignment done and turn it in. If you don't turn it in that night, then it doesn't count, okay? It just doesn't. If for some reason BB Learn messes up on you, email it to me so that I know that you had it done by 11:58 that night. Because I know how you like to work on things last minute. So get it done that day. If you turn it into me the next day or the next morning, I won't count it. Okay, so make sure it's on time. This is one of the few assignments where I say I will not accept a late one no matter what. All right? If you have a special situation, please contact me about that special situation. Otherwise, I will expect that for the next 4 days, you will be turning in a daily report. The assignment will open up in the morning and close in the evening. So you need to get on there, write it up, put your picture in. Don't forget to take a picture during your day. And do this. Complete and comprehensive. Objective and truthful. Timely. Make sure it's all there. All right. Talk to you next week.